Welcome to the Page One Podcast, a twice-weekly podcast featuring a variety of guests and thought leaders on topics ranging from channel strategies to tariffs, influencer marketing, best-in-class product launches, and all the details about how to accelerate your e-commerce sales with the big box retailers, or what we call R-commerce. Now here's your host, Luke Peters.
Thanks for joining us on the Page One Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Peters, and this is a special COVID-19 podcast. So what I'm going to do is I have a solo cast here, and I know in my latest episodes, or all my episodes, I'm usually interviewing a successful business leader, and I'll continue to do that. But I thought, for the sake of interest, maybe that I would put down some of my own thoughts. And so I'm going to run through, it's April 6th right now, and I know this COVID-19 is affecting all of us, and there's definitely been some big positive moves that I'll talk about specifically in the last week that has helped businesses. But at the same time, I just wanted to kind of put my thoughts down, and hopefully these are going to be helpful to you, the listeners. And, I'll try to do this every week or every couple of weeks in between interviewing business leaders. And by the way, one thing I also wanted to talk about here on the Page One podcast is all of my new episodes with business leaders. We are going to start with a quick kind of discussion around COVID-19 and how they're navigating it. So I thought that would be helpful, useful, something that you guys can put into practice. So hope you guys enjoy those episodes. Hope they're helpful. And I know, our minds now is kind of always around COVID-19. It's affecting our business and of course our lives, and we're all locked at home. And so I'm going to run through a couple of things here. I'm going to talk about my just kind of COVID-19 thoughts. I'm going to set the business tone. In this episode, I'm also going to say what businesses I know of are talking about. We'll talk about the timing of the problem. I'm just going to give you a couple of predictions or thoughts on my end. I'm going to give you more in-depth details about how businesses are solving problems and sales problems around COVID-19, especially when they've been impacted heavily. And then we'll finish with some positive news. So this will be a quick episode, a solo cast, just kind of positioning us right here on April 6th. And so let's start with the initial thoughts. And I wrote these down about a week or two ago, but I've always thought that, COVID-19 is a lot more dangerous than the flu. And right now it's obvious, everybody is kind of on board with that. But it wasn't so obvious even a couple of weeks ago. And I think there's still some folks that are not sure about that. And, today, unfortunately, Prime Minister of the UK is Boris Johnson was just admitted to ICU. So hopefully he's fine. But that's serious when the leader of a free country is now in ICU. I think he's 55 and he's had symptoms for 11 or 12 days, I think, at this point. So this is really serious. And I'm going to get more into what that actually means when we talk about the timing. The amount, you talk about mortality, but there's also morbidity, which is the amount of people that get severely ill from this, and it's high. So, what was my takeaway from that is that, our leaders, you would think they would know more than the average person, but it seems like a lot of investors knew, more than a lot of our officials around how dangerous this virus was, which is really kind of disappointing. So that's kind of my takeaway there is that, hey, we got to think and plan for ourselves, and, we can apply that to future situations. So let's set the business tone here. And this has to go with, I interview a lot of people, and I'm in several different business groups. So I guess this is, more than in-depth discussions with 30 or 40 companies. And a lot of them are seeing a demand crush, really. We're super fortunate here at New Air, and we're not seeing that. But I think companies, on the consulting side, like where Retail Band is, folks are they're focused on their business, not on hiring, consultants or agencies. So there's definitely a demand crush on a lot of businesses, and everybody I speak to is really concerned. I will say today that stocks were up insanely high, and I'm actually surprised at that. Just on the investor side, I see this, hurting GDP for a long time, and I think it might have been because of potential another government stimulus potentially. I'm not sure if that was the reason they're up, but that's kind of what I heard. And we're not going to be 100% back open in a month. Even if we're open, it's not going to be all the way. And so I think, that's going to go back to that demand problem. So, we'll check back in a month and see where we are. But that's kind of what I'm thinking right now as of April 6th is I still am concerned about demand. I'm concerned about, so many folks that are out of work and they don't want to be out of work. And, hopefully that doesn't trickle down, but I don't see how it can't. And what are businesses talking about right now? So right now, I'll give you a couple specific things on kind of what I'm hearing from friends and colleagues. So first off, everybody's talking about the PPP plan. This seems to be just an outstanding government plan. I mean, giving away a bunch of money, that could hurt us in the future, but for what it is, it seems like it's a lot more useful than say TARP was in 2008 for the typical company, because here regular small businesses are going to get significant aid. And this probably has in large part is why the stock market is rebounding, because when you see so many small businesses going to get tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars, I mean, it's going to be a massive stimulus back into small business. And I think the folks that created it were really smart. If you look at the testing and how the formulas are set up, it's kind of put together fairly, I think, and they kind of make it so companies can't take advantage of it, but it's significant. So, as far as what my colleagues and friends are talking about, they're talking about that. They're getting those all submitted, submitting it today, which is, I think it could have been submitted this weekend today. So a lot of companies are right in the middle of this, getting it done. A lot of companies are adjusting their demand plan. They've been doing that for a couple of weeks. And I'm sure the listeners have already looked at that. But if you haven't, that's looking at your forecast. Many of them are adjusting down because they're getting more conservative. Fixing the demand plan protects cash flow. And, again, I'm talking to an audience of business owners, so I'm sure you guys have thought about this. So hopefully I'm not stating the obvious, but fixing your demand plan is going to fix your cash flow better than cutting expenses. Especially with an inventory type company. I mean, if you have owned inventory, there's a lot more money going into that. And that's going to be, where the initial time is going to have bigger dividends on the cash flow side. So those are the key conversations I'm seeing. And it'll be interesting to see how that changes as I do more of these solo casts on COVID-19. I'll quickly talk about the timing of the problem. So I follow a bunch of podcasts. One of them, I'll give a little shout out to Macro Voices. It's an incredible financial podcast. I love it. Long-term thinking. They were really bearish on COVID-19, really bearish, but they had a lot of great insights. And, we can only make our decisions based on the known facts. And then there was obviously government came in with this massive stimulus, but, we can react to what we know and leave hope out of it for now. But the government really has come through from a stimulus perspective. I think it's been massive. And now the curve is literally starting to flatten. Now, it'll be interesting in about a week where we are, but I think New York is kind of getting towards their apex, but it seems like there haven't been any huge blowups elsewhere in the country. And here in California, they really have seemed to shut it down. So that's great, but it also means, they've shut down business. There isn't really a known treatment. There isn't obviously a vaccine, and, all of those things are going to be challenges. And I think there's a lot of optimism that we flatten the curve, but my concern, and we're talking about timing here, is I think we're going to basically be in this sort of situation until they get a vaccine, because we can open some things up, but they're not going to be able to open up movie theaters or cruise ships. It's going to be kind of a hazard to fly unless they kind of figure out better steps on, say, antibody testing or some other methods that they may do. And then these things will change. So I think antibody testing will be a big breakthrough. But the reason I'm talking about this is, what does that mean for Q2, Q3? We're probably impacted in my view. Hopefully Q4 is less of an impact, but I don't know. I wouldn't hold my breath with, if the virus is still around, then it's going to have an impact, but maybe we will have better adjusted by that point. So, back to more details about what businesses are doing. Hopefully this will kind of stimulate some ideas with you guys, but I got a lot of friends. We're doing Zoom meetings, group Zoom meetings. We're having our, business meetings that are normally in person over Zoom and talking about these strategies. Obviously a lot of focus on the PPP plan, and then, a big focus on a move to online sales. So this could be, kind of a long-term mega trend, which has already started, but this could just cement it, where companies realize that when half of their sales disappear because their brick and mortar companies are down, then there's really a massive push to online. And we're seeing that. And if you go to Google Trends, and I just did a bunch of research over the weekend, just basic Google Trend research, just look at the trend on, I'll give you a couple companies, like look at, homedepot.com, look at target.com, look at walmart.com. The trend is way up, actually. It's way up in the end of March and then into April. So what does that tell you? So, if someone's in store and they're not, this is definitely something that a lot of, friends and colleagues are talking about, and could be top of mind for you, the listener, if you guys are not already positioned that way. So hopefully this podcast has been helpful. I just wanted to give, my thoughts as they are at this time, and things change so quickly with COVID-19. We'll finish with some positive news. My hope is that there actually are some really positive potential treatments. We hear about chloroquine, I think you pronounce it, and Z-Pak. the problem, my concern there is you hear about Boris Johnson going into ICU. And when that happens, in my mind, I was like, wait a minute, he's the leader of a country. He would have already received this treatment that may not be allowed or available to everybody, but surely he would have gotten, whatever viral treatments are out there. But then you hear him going into ICU and it kind of gives you some concern, like, hey, maybe, there really isn't any treatment yet, which no one has said there is, but kind of in the back of my mind, or in a lot of people's minds, you would think that, for the leaders of the world, that they have some stockpile or that they know something that we don't know. But that is a little scary to think about. So there really isn't. And viruses, by the way, they're just a lot harder to create treatments for versus, say, bacteria. And so I already wasn't optimistic on that, but I'm a little bit more concerned now. But the good news is that, private enterprise is really helping. You see everybody pitching in, everybody helping out, people cheering every day in New York, cheering the healthcare workers. So I think, we're going to get through this and there will be a vaccine, but I think it's also going to unify the country, and a lot of companies are helping. I think that's one of the best things the task force has done, is brought all the great American companies together like they kind of were in World War II. And, these companies are working together to create things to help the virus fight. And it's good for business and it's good for the country. But I think on the bright side, that'll be kind of after, we've won this, it's going to change the supply chain forever, I think. And maybe I'll talk about that on a future solo cast. But, how are you guys thinking about your future supply chains? Right now, there is a little bit of a move of deglobalization. Sometimes companies can't do it easily. And we found that out with the tariffs that went in. It wasn't just so easy to jump to another country. But I think that is going to accelerate actually in the future. And that should change how we think about our future plans as, business owners and where we're sourcing and how we're sourcing and who we're partnering with. So we'll leave it at that on this episode of the Page One podcast. Hope you guys are safe and healthy and hope your businesses are thriving. And also, I'm doing a free evaluation of your online business strategy. If you're interested, find me on LinkedIn or at luke@retailband.com. We'll take a look at how you guys are doing on, homedepot.com or Walmart or Amazon and a bunch of other retailers. Make sure you're strong online. That's where the sales are right now. And we'll do all we can to help you out there. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to the Page One podcast with Luke Peters. If you like our show and want to know more, check out our other segments. Also, please help us out by leaving us a rating on iTunes. Want to learn more about our commerce? Check out www.retailband.com to get more great tips and tricks on how to accelerate your e-commerce sales with the big box retailers.